Hi, my name is Maya and I work with high school students to help them prepare for and apply to college. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed. There are a lot of types of being overwhelmed. You could be emotionally overwhelmed, socially overwhelmed, just overwhelmed by the weight of the world. But in this video, I'm going to be talking specifically about being overwhelmed by the things that you have to do. Starting with millennials and now with Gen Zs, I think the number of things that high school students are expected to do and accomplish are getting more and more overwhelming. It used to be that you could get A's in school, maybe do a couple extracurriculars or have a job, and expect to get into a pretty good college just based on that. And you can still do that, but if you're looking at selective colleges, which is becoming more and more of them, you're expected to do a whole lot more. You're expected to take lots of AP or IB classes, join clubs, do other extracurriculars, demonstrate leadership, do community service, and that's all on top of just living. So I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed. To me, overwhelm usually falls into one of two buckets. Either I have so much to do that I feel overwhelmed, or I am really overwhelmed by this specific intimidating task. Usually there's some of both, like you have a bunch of intimidating tasks. So in this video, I'm going to do a few different things. First, I'm going to walk you through a 4-step process of what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed by all the things that you have to do, and talk a little bit about how to avoid this if it's an ongoing problem. After that, I'm going to go into what to do when you're feeling so stressed or overwhelmed by one especially big or important task that you don't know how to get started. Finally, I'm going to share some of my thoughts about the role that stress and perfectionism play in all of this. I'm going to start with a too many tasks type of overwhelm, but if you're feeling more overwhelmed by one single task, then you can also go ahead and skip ahead. I've put timestamps in the description for the video. All right, so let's get into it. The 4-step process for when you're feeling overwhelmed. You'll just need a piece of paper, a pen, and 2 different colored highlighters. Step 1, write down literally just everything that's on your mind that you need to do. And I don't mean just things that you have to do, like your homework, but things that you want to do, things that you're thinking about doing, things that you might want to do at some point in the future, just kind of anything that's running through your head of I should do this. That could be everything from finish your math homework to text a friend to clean your room or even watch the next season of your favorite TV show. The purpose of this step is to clear out all the little things that might be running through your mind and making it hard to pick one task to focus on. Sometimes the feeling of being overwhelmed will immediately start to lift as you do this because you're getting all of that out of your head and onto the paper. For step 2, you're going to start to organize this list by identifying urgent tasks. So for this, you're going to pick a highlighter. I usually pick the brightest, glowiest color that conveys the most urgency to me. Take the highlighter, go through the list, and highlight everything that needs to be done urgently within the next 24 to 48 hours. Now you can look at this list and see what is effectively your actual to-do list because those urgent things that need to be done will pop out when you look at it. A lot of the times when I do this, I actually stop here because putting it all down on paper just kind of cleared my head, and then I've highlighted the things that are urgent, and now I feel like, okay, I know what I need to be doing right now. However, if you have a lot going on, it can be a good idea to go ahead with step 3, which is identifying semi-urgent tasks. Just take the other color highlighter and highlight everything that needs to be done within the next 7 days. Now, once you've been able to take care of everything in the first color, you'll be able to look at the list and immediately see what your secondary priorities are. This is all obviously adaptable. I am all about finding systems that work for you. Sometimes I will take a pen and circle everything I'm going to do today. Or maybe I'll take a pen and circle the 3 most important things I need to focus on. Or sometimes I'll actually put little parentheses around the things that I put on the list, but I don't actually think are that important or I don't want to focus on, so I can kind of set them aside. It's all about whatever helps you feel most like you're regaining control of everything that's going on in your life. And then for step 4, you can do another level of organizing, which is actually separating all these things out into different lists. I actually don't recommend doing this in the moment that you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed. You should probably be tackling those things from step 1. But at some point, when you've gotten the essentials back under control, if you're someone who finds lists to be helpful, you can redo the original kind of brain dump into a more organized set of lists and goals. This could take a lot of different forms, but it could look something like this. List 1, a set of urgent and semi-urgent tasks, and you could highlight those in different colors like you did before. List 2, larger projects that you want to come back to and work on breaking down into more manageable parts, like say start college research. List 3, long-term personal goals you want to be working towards. List 4, fun things you'd like to do when you have a little bit more time, like movies you've been meaning to watch. Part of step 4 could also mean sitting down with a calendar to plan out long-term projects or strategies, like coming up with a weekly plan to study for the SAT. Again, the main thing here is to not let this bog you down. I don't actually do step 4 very often. You should only do it if it helps you and if you have time. Okay, so that's the 4-step process for dealing with being overwhelmed when you have lots of things to do. At this point, you should have a pretty good idea of what you should be focusing on right now. However, you might still be feeling overwhelmed. If you're still feeling overwhelmed, it probably stems from one of 2 things. 1, you have too many urgent things to do, or 2, you are overwhelmed by a specific task or tasks that just seem too big and intimidating. Let's address number 1 first, because that's actually pretty straightforward. First, I suggest identifying the ones that you can just do fastest and doing a handful of those, just to cut down on the amount of things on the list, and that will usually help you feel a little bit better. Second, you have to assess whether it's literally physically possible to do all of these tasks and at what cost. If it's literally not possible, or would mean that you would have to not sleep for 3 days, you need to reevaluate what counts as urgent. And that might mean being less perfectionistic about something in your life that you would ideally like to do differently. So like turning in an assignment late or doing not as good of a job on it. If this happens to you a lot, you're probably either trying to do too much or you're getting distracted and wasting your time in some way. So at some point you may want to step back and reassess how much you have going on and if you're using your time effectively. You might be feeling pressure to take a lot of difficult classes and participate in a lot of extracurriculars in order to get into a good college. But if you're doing so much that you're not able to do it well and or it's taking a toll on your mental or physical health, then it's just not worth it and you might need to cut down on some things. Okay, so let's talk about what to do when you're overwhelmed by a specific intimidating task. When a specific task feels really overwhelming, there's usually one of 2 things going on. Either 1, the task as you've set it is not clearly actionable, and I'm going to talk about what that means in a minute, or the task is just so important or intimidating in some way that you just can't bring yourself to start or can't figure out how to do that. And there's definitely a lot of overlap between these 2 things. Let me start by clarifying what I mean when I say a task is not actionable. What I mean by this is if you actually said, okay, I'm going to go do this now, it would not be clear what exactly you needed to go do. This is the difference between something like learn French or learn to cook, which is a really broad goal, versus a specific task that needs to be done, which could be something like cook dinner tonight. Similarly, something like start exercising is something a lot of people will get hung up on because, it's too vague. What kind of exercising? How long? For how often? What I was originally having you do was more like a brain dump. Like I wasn't telling you to censor what you're putting down. But if you're going back through it and you're like, I can't get started on this thing that is really important to me, you might have to actually kind of rewrite it or reframe it into an actionable task that you can get started on. As a counselor, this is actually something I do with students sometimes, depending on their needs. So if I have a student who comes to me and they say, I want to learn to cook or I want to learn French, I help them come up with a plan for doing that that gives them steps that they can follow. So it's not just like they're sitting there trying to figure out how to do this really big thing. They have it as a series of actionable items over a reasonable period of time. So say you have on your list something like study for the AP US history test and you're feeling really stressed out because it's really important to you to do well on this test. It covers a ton of content because it's for the whole year and you just feel like you don't know where to start. You need to work on making a list where you break this all down into steps. So you might have something like review my class notes, review my tests, review the book, maybe get a prep book and work your way through that book and put it on a schedule. Similarly, write my personal statement for college might be a hugely overwhelming task for you. So I would say break that down into steps. Do some research on what a personal statement should look like. Brainstorm lists of possible topics. Write or free write paragraphs on those topics. Pick one to expand into a longer essay. And then finally, draft the essay. So at no point are you just saying like, okay, this afternoon I'm going to sit down and just write my personal statement from scratch. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about the bigger picture of being overwhelmed because I think it's not necessarily just about the tasks you have to do. It's also about how perfectionism and stress and like your amount of self-confidence can affect your feeling that you are able to do the things that you need to do. Part of the feeling of being overwhelmed is often this sense that you just like cannot possibly do whatever that thing is. And you need to sort out if that's actually true, or if you actually can do the thing. You're just holding yourself to an impossible standard in your head, and that's preventing you from getting started on it. Or you're letting negative self-talk get in the way, like, oh, I'm just not good enough to do this, or I'm just not smart enough to do this. Sometimes you have to ask, what is the minimum I need to do to get this done? And let go of any worry about it being perfect or even good. It took me a really long time to learn this. Like throughout high school and even into college, I basically thought that if I didn't get an A on something, it was basically the same as failing, and there was no in between. But when I was in graduate school, I started teaching writing at UCI, and I started to actually see what happens when students, don't turn in an assignment or turn in an assignment that isn't really done very well. And this kind of comes down to the math. So the students that like turned in something like a not very good essay, like they might get a B or a C in the class because, they might get 70 or 80%, like 70 or 80 points out of 100 on that assignment. If you don't turn in that assignment, you're getting 0 out of 100. And that's like way harder to bounce back from. You're pretty much always gonna be better off turning in an assignment that's less than perfect or even kind of bad. That's going to be better than not turning in an assignment. And this is true not just of assignments, but basically anything that you have to do, anything to do with college apps or essays. It's all the same thing. Like sometimes you just need to get started on it, not really worrying about what the end product is going to be. I know it's easier said than done. Like you can't just, shake off perfectionism or stress or negative self-talk just because you tell yourself that you should. But you can try. And so just sort of sitting down and saying, no, I can do this. Like, it's okay if it's not perfect, and making yourself kind of continually reinforce those ideas. Like, I'm just going to do the best job I can. That'll make a big difference if you're just kind of like frozen with that feeling of being overwhelmed. So I know in this video, I really touched on a lot of different topics. So if you'd like to see me expand on some aspect of this topic, please let me know in the comments. And as always, please click like and subscribe for more videos on preparing for college and the college application process.